Reaches, oh, that ball's out, that's live! Back the other way, Sam Hubbard! The Cincinnati Kid! Hubbard's got a convoy! Chased by Andrews! At the 30, the 20, he will score!
To the end zone, down the field, and it is deflected, and gone! Touchdown! A.J. Green!
Goes back to throw. Men are coming late. Looks right down the middle. There's Eddie Brown. He has it at the 35 to the 30. He may go 10-5. Touchdown.
Now the Bengals Super Bowl chances rest on his right foot. The kick is up.
Yeah.
It is good.
Corey Dillon, he's gone. The knockout punch, you're looking at it. 65 yards.
And they're back to throw as the blitz is on. Goes long, intended for Collinsworth. He has it down to the 20. Touchdown. And Chris Collinsworth.
Throwing the long ball. Deep down the field. Chad Johnson's got it. Touchdown. Cincinnati.
Look at Chase go. Oh my goodness, what a gear he just found. Chase for the touchdown. Wow, Chase is on the case.
It is no fluke. It is a fact. The Cincinnati Bengals are headed to Super Bowl 56. The play clock at 3. Shotgun snap. Carr throws into traffic. Intercepted. Jermaine Pratt has the football.
Yeah.
Coffin nails.
Bam, bam, bam. How about that?
Another classic 2024 Cincinnati Bengals football game this week. 37-27 win over a bottom-of-the-barrel 3-win Tennessee Titans team. And they got a touchdown in right at the end just to make it look even more accurate to how this game was played. Craig joins me as always to recap what honestly might be one of the worst football games of all time, at least if you look at it statistically. First game since at least 2000 with 200 yards and penalties and over 10 turnovers. Just unbelievable to see that kind of sloppy football played by both sides. Really just ugly from start to finish, but the Bengals get a 10-point win, and it's hard not to feel good about that at this point in the season. Oh, Craig, I think you're muted.
I am indeed.
There you go.
Am I
Week
back
15,
now?
we're all right.
Pro move. Oh, hideous ball game, Jacob. Obviously, you mentioned it. 26 penalties, 223 yards on those penalties, 10 turnovers, 6 of which by the Titans. From the very beginning, it was an ugly football game. Joe Burrow on his first pass with a pass that I still don't understand what was happening there. Not pretty there, and it just went downhill from there. You did exactly what you needed to do against Will Levis. You got him uncomfortable. You got him turning the ball over, and he kind of imploded like you thought he might. But to give up 27 points to this Tennessee Titans team that averages 17.5 on the year, to have a situation like you had today where you turn them over 6 times and they still find a way to score 27 because you turn it back over to them 4 times. Not pretty, and definitely one of Joe's uglier games on the year.
For sure.
I know it's been littered with really, really good games, so not hard to have one of your worst games of the year, but he ends at 26 of 37 for 271 yards, the 3 touchdowns, but then the 2 interceptions and the fumble loss. So, look, you go on the road in the NFL, you pick up a win. Like you said, hard to be too upset about it, but, I mean, for a team who's trying to claw their way into the playoffs, it's really hard to watch today's game and think that they have a chance at making any sort of noise in the playoffs, even if they do find a way to get their butt in there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, zero encouragement, or zero added encouragement, I should say. After this win, you didn't exactly learn anything new. You learned they still can't tackle, and at least they were able to take seize the opportunities given to them by the Titans quarterbacks. Obviously, Will Levis kind of does this against most people, and then Mason Rudolph isn't going to burn the world down when he's thrown in there at quarterback. But we've seen this Bengals defense time and time again allow bad quarterbacks to beat them, and when Will Levis gave them opportunities to take the ball back, get the ball back in Joe Burrow's hands, they seized it, and they even made some plays on their own. So I do give some kudos to the Bengals defense, though it wasn't all around absolutely garbage game, exactly what we've continued to expect. But if they're going to allow 27 points to the Titans, how do you win that game? You win that game by forcing some turnovers as well. So they did what they had to do to give the offense a chance when the offense hit a wall there kind of in the middle of the game, but it worked out, and that's really what it comes down to. The Bengals won an ugly football game, which honestly is most of their wins this year. This Bengals team hasn't really won pretty, except for one exception against the Raiders. It hasn't really been pretty at all this year, 37-27, and I think there were a lot of clenched butt cheeks throughout most of the day here on Sunday with this one, even though we had a big lead most of the game. The other wins on the year, 21-14 over the Browns, 17-7 over the Giants, there just hasn't been a lot of relaxation watching the Bengals this year. It's been a lot of nerve-wracking wins and heartbreaking losses, and if you have to pick out of those two, you obviously take the win, and that keeps us alive, and that's such a big thing as we go in the rest of the season. Look, we all know it's a long shot. But it's nice to have a chance. It's nice to have a number next to your name when you open up New York Times Playoff Predictor, and if it's a single-digit number, so be it, but that's better than zero, and that's where we're at, and you have to win the bad football games. But I think the ultimate question after watching a game like that, and I see a lot of the sentiment in the chat, is we have to make changes, we have to change the coaching staff. When you watch a game that's that sloppy, basically from every single position, does that fall on the coaching staff? Is that a reflection of the coaching staff? This Bengals team, one of the least penalized team in the league through the first 9 weeks. Now through the last 4, they're one of the most penalized teams in the entire league. So a big switch here towards the back half of the season. Does that fall on the coaching staff? Is watching a game like we watched today a product of a lack of control in the locker room?
Well, let's not forget that on Saturday or Friday afternoon, Saturday, we find out that Cody Ford is questionable coming into the game now due to illness. And we're forced to put basically a third or fourth string offensive lineman in as your starting left tackle. So right off the bat, you know it's going to be ugly. And I don't know the final count on penalties for him, but I mean, certainly not exactly what you're hoping for out of your O-line. And so, you get Cam Grandy with 2 penalties. You get Matt Lee, who's in there in garbage time. I don't know how much of that necessarily falls on the coaching staff. I mean, you're trying to force your way in to being comfortable in a game early on. I think some of the holding penalties or the defensive pass interference penalties early on were being called pretty tight both ways. So there's a lot that kind of goes into all of this. I don't know that I necessarily put much, if any, of the blame on coaching on this one in particular. Like, coaching doesn't make Cody Ford healthy today.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
so, I mean, I don't know if that necessarily needs to fall on the coaching staff.
I do think Devin Cochran, after starting off slow, being very apparent that he was out there on that first Bengals drive, really kind of meshed into the game pretty well as it went on. He was more or less unseen for the bulk of that game, which is a big thing when you have a practice squad tackle in the game. But the culprits that are usually the culprits were, right out there in the center for everyone to see. The guards, just as bad as they've been all year. Cordell Volson, Alex Kappa. I saw people in the chat during this game, and you touched on it there with Cody Ford's late illness designation, which had him out for this game against Tennessee. People asking, how do we not have anyone better than these guards? It was, well, the guy that is better than these guards, at least supposedly, he was put in for Volson earlier this year, was forced to play tackle because Orlando Brown got hurt. And then he got hurt, so we have to get a guy off the practice squad to play tackle, so the guy that got benched at guard is automatically back in the game. It's not a pretty situation. Really, any team, when you get this deep into O-line depth, is going to be struggling. And when the Bengals starters are already as bad as they are, the depth can't be great. And I think that really came out today. And that's why Burrow, though, yet again, somehow avoids sacks, still running for his life, most of the day today. Just a really tough game to watch. The Tennessee defense only gets 1 sack, but hit him so many more times than that, and really able to just make him get off platform and run like he's had to do most of the last couple games. And I really don't know what else there is to ask for him. I know obviously you want him to protect the ball more today, but we're talking about opening the show saying he had one of the worst games of his season, and he absolutely did. There's no way around that. But it's 271 yards, 3 touchdowns, and obviously you want the 2 picks to go away, but that's a game statistically that most quarterbacks would kill for. 271 and 3 touchdowns. I know those 3 touchdowns came really early in the game, and it tailed off at the end, but if that's the low level for Joe Burrow, you should still be able to win a lot of games with that level of play. So he just continues to show that the region in which he's going to play in this season is, as long as he can do that for the rest of his career, it's going to give the Bengals the opportunity to win a lot.
Yeah, like you mentioned, I mean, Cochran ultimately the 4th or 5th string offensive tackle, depending on how you look at it, and kind of has to come in. But when you've got Joe Burrow on your team and some of the evasive moves that he was able to make throughout this game and show that what we've talked about time and time again on this show, that he is probably the best mobile passer in the NFL. Not necessarily the best mobile quarterback, not necessarily the best passer, but certainly seems to be the best mobile passer when he's on the move.
Yeah.
I mean, you almost feel more confident when he's scrambling than you do when he's sitting in the pocket. Like when he's sitting in the pocket, sometimes I'm just wondering how long before it collapses on him. And then when he escapes it, I'm like, all right, well, somebody's going to get open down the field and he's going to find a way to make a completion here out of, defying all odds. And, certainly made some ill-advised passes today. The first interception we already mentioned, that deep ball where he tried to get it to Jamar in the end zone was poorly thrown, to say the least. But it still a Joe game, and the other piece of it is that the Bengals were able to adjust their attack there and give the ball a little bit more on the ground to Chase Brown. He picks up 25 carries on the day, only goes for 97 yards, but does score the touchdown on the ground in addition to his touchdown through the air. And it just, it was an interesting game, and I'm sure Zach Taylor and Dan Pitcher were trying to adjust as it went based on the outcomes and the number of turnovers that they were getting from the Tennessee offense and how quickly they were getting back on the field. But then, only for things like the fumble at the goal line to really kind of turn things around. And it just, it was an entire game of hilarity and I don't know, it just shows that this team probably isn't ready for a playoff run. But when you have Joe Burrow, it's really frustrating because he feels like he should be in the playoffs every single year. And if he's in the playoffs, it feels like he's going to be good enough to make a run.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that's where the frustration comes for a lot of Bengals fans. They put up a graphic on this broadcast today, a comparison of Joe Burrow's points output, yardage output, all that stuff lined up with the 2 AFC championship seasons, and he's right on par, even a little bit better in a lot of statistical categories. Just continues to show that the offense, at least statistically on paper, is doing everything they need to do to get this team back to that level, and it's just being let down by the other 3 sides, or the other 2 sides of the 3-sided football. And we saw that start to happen again today with Cade York. His first miss in a Bengals uniform, misses the extra point. So maybe a kicker competition coming down to Cincinnati this offseason. But one more thing I wanted to touch on in bad football, because I think it did just kind of encapsulate the entire Bengals season. We sit here, we've complained about Sam Hubbard a lot this season. We have, and I know he's struggled, but still having healthy guys out there is important. And even if he's not healthy, his ability to play through injuries has meant something to the Bengals this year when so many guys have missed so much time. You bring Sam Hubbard in as a fullback tight end on a touchdown goal line play. You throw him the ball, touchdown, whoopee, let's celebrate. Knee injury for your starting edge rusher who's now out for the rest of the game, maybe the rest of the season. We don't know the severity of it yet. But if that's the farewell for Sam Hubbard, a gimmick play touchdown in Cincinnati or in Nashville to cap off his Bengals career, that'd be a perfect encapsulation of not just the 2024 season, but I think really Sam Hubbard's career as a whole.
Well, you never want to celebrate injuries, but I know there's been a lot of people in this chat and on social that have been calling for Sam Hubbard to get less opportunities to begin with. And we saw last week he got out-snapped for the first time this year. Look, I feel bad for Sam Hubbard. He's been battling that hamstring
Absolutely.
injury all year. How he's avoided the injury report is still beyond me. I don't understand that piece, but they called it a right knee injury from what I saw. So I don't know if that's necessarily still the hamstring or if something else got aggravated there. He didn't seem injured right away, so I don't know if something happened later on
Zach Taylor
in the celebration
said the
or
injury happened on the touchdown catch, so nothing pre-existing, at least is what the story they're sticking with. But the
nothing pre-existing and nothing on film that appeared to cause it either. It's not like he got twisted up, or at least didn't appear to be twisted up
hard. So I don't know if it could be a meniscus or something along those lines, but it's certainly, with the hits he's taken and the injuries he's played through, didn't look like anything that would knock him out for the game or much less longer.
Yeah.
With Sam Hubbard out, what we've been asking for the whole time is to get him out of the lineup so we can see more from the young guys. Took an edge rusher in the first round a couple of years ago. We wanted to see more reps out of him. Well, with Sam Hubbard out, Myles Murphy gets thrust into the game. And what happens? He gets benched for undrafted free agent Cedric Johnson later in the game. It's just ridiculous that this guy has still been unable to progress really at all in his time in Cincinnati. He gets more opportunities this year than he has in the past, and he's not seizing them. He's been worse and worse statistically than he was last year. Last year, at least in the minimal sample size, you were able to hold on to some pass rush win rate stats, some more, stats like that where you can say, well, maybe there's some growth in there somewhere where you can hold on to Myles Murphy. I think he could be a big part of this team in the future. This year, with no steps forward and basically some steps back, I don't know how you can rely on him moving forward on this team with edge rusher already as a major need. You can't count on him being a reliable piece.
I don't know what you do with him either. Only 1 tackle, 0 quarterback hits, obviously 0 sacks. Credited with 3 hurries on the day, but he was nowhere to be found. You didn't hear his name called at all. You didn't hear anything coming from the announcers about him being anyone near him. Kelsey Conway tweeted out, I guess I didn't realize this, he's got only 1 QB hit on the entire year. And that is not good enough for a first round draft pick by far.
Right.
And I realize that the Bengals haven't given him a ton of opportunities, but I mean, today was not great, and he continues to not give them a whole lot out of the pass rush. And in a game like today, where you knew the Titans were going to have to throw the ball because of the way the game was going, for him not to be able to get going and get any sort of pressure on the quarterback is not good enough.
Not at all. Not at all. And it just leaves the Bengals in a tough spot when they keep being unable to get consistent production out of their first-round picks. You're going into an offseason now where you're going to have to talk about accepting Dax Hill's 5th-year option. And that's a guy who hasn't even really found a position yet for the Bengals. He was thrust into corner this year, was supposed to, maybe blossom there, and he looked like there was some promise before his injury. But now you're going to have that conversation without ever seeing him really make a difference at one position. And then Myles Murphy, another first-round pick the year later, and now you're going into his 4th season, and you have no idea what he gives this team. It's just frustrating, and it continues to happen with the Bengals. We talk about it all the time. You have to focus on the draft. You have to hit on draft picks when you have big money players. And if this offseason goes the way a lot of us are projecting it now, when you're extending Jamar Chase, you're extending T. Higgins, you're filling a lot of holes on this defense, then you're going to have to hit in the draft because that's a lot of money that you're spending on those big-name free agent signings, and you have a lot of holes on this team. We know that. We talked about Joe Burrow's interceptions. We talked about Will Levis and Mason Rudolph's turnovers, but I think the biggest turnover of the game and the one that got the chat fired up the most was my dear friend, fellow Crimson Tider, Jordan Battle. Fumble recovery, goes to run it back to the house, and I don't know what the plan was. Was it celebration? Was it spike? I don't know if he was trying to look cool, but dropped it before he got into the end zone. The most infuriating play in sports for my money, because I just cannot wrap my head around how you drop the ball. There's 0 to gain by dropping the ball the instant that you cross the goal line. Hold it all the way to the back wall. Hand it to a fan. I don't care what it is, but you do not need to drop the ball the instant you cross the goal line. I don't understand why players do this more often than it seems like they ever have with social media. You see every single time it happens, and it continues to happen all across sports, high school, college, and NFL. It's a problem in football, and it really happens everywhere. This wasn't necessarily a full celebration. I think he did just start juggling the ball. It was really confusing, but either way, you gotta be smarter and just hold on to the football until you cross the line.
Well, the one benefit of the doubt I'll give Jordan Battle on that play is it didn't look like he dropped it on purpose like we've seen so many players do. It did. I don't know. He was carrying the ball in the wrong hand the entire way, and then at the end of when he's all by himself, he decides he wants to switch it over. I don't know what happened. Certainly was not. I don't know what was going through his head. He immediately knew it though, so I'll give him credit for that. Yeah. He immediately knew it, tried to go after it, looked disappointed the minute that he picked it back up when it was out of bounds. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt with the fact that it wasn't just one of those drop it at the goal line kind of things, but not something that you want to see, but at the same time, at least it wasn't showboating, at least I don't think.
Yeah, no, it certainly didn't seem like it, and Battle has certainly not been flawless. He's a young player playing in a secondary with a team with no pass rush, but he's been a bright spot on this team since he's been thrust into a bigger role, certainly better than the Von Bell-Geno Stone safety duo. So frustrating play to see from a young player who hopefully was starting to come into his own a little bit. Hopefully it won't knock him off the track too much. Clear your head, get back in there. He'll be all right. It's a young player. Things happen. People in the chat were saying cut him, and I was like, that's crazy.
And that's crazy. Speaking of Geno Stone, Jacob, your boy, now that the Bengals had a 2% chance at the playoffs, he's climbing. He's climbing.
Did he outdo last
But
week?
let's also be honest. Let's be honest with the interception he had last week was a tip drill that fell right into his hands. Yeah. The one this week, I think he made a decent move. Like, don't get me wrong, he was able to cut off the ball, but like a terrible throw from Will Levis.
No,
but
absolutely.
Yeah, Geno Stone, your boy, climbing.
Look at that. We'll take it. He's going to do just enough in this last 6 weeks of the season that we're not going to be able to cut him, and that's going to be fun. That's going to be fun to watch him walk out next year in stripes. Our friend over at Gridiron Grading dropping some statistics on the timeline from today's game. Two interesting ones that I did just want to touch on here. Myles Murphy, though he didn't have any QB pressures or sacks, he did lead the Bengals in pass rush win rate. He had the highest pass rush win rate on the Bengals based off PFF's early charting. Only played 30 snaps, like you said, but with Sam Hubbard out now for at least, you'd have to think next week. Hopefully more for Myles Murphy. Maybe if he can get into a zone and get into a rhythm, he can become more the player that we thought he was going to be. That's wishful thinking at this point, but with a 5% playoff chance and a bunch of young guys who haven't shown you much, I think all Bengals fans have is wishful thinking. So I guess we do still have some statistics we can hold on to for Myles Murphy. And for another young player on the Bengals that has struggled at points this year, rookie tackle Amarius Mims had the best start of his NFL career. First start of his career with 0 pressures allowed. That's a really, really good game for a rookie tackle who he's been good this season, but has struggled against some of the league's best in terms of allowing pressures. Still has been good in the sack front, but today against a lackluster edge rush pair in Tennessee, he was able to hold his own, and no one that rushed on Mims really got close to Joe Burrow. So good signs there for two young players, I guess, on the Bengals team as we move forward.
Yeah, can't complain about that. I mean, if we're being honest, Ted Karras and Amarius Mims both seem like they're rock solid on this offensive line. It's just a real shame that the other three have kind of let them down. I mean, you look at the pass block grades out of those two. Ted Karras today with an 83.5, Amarius Mims with a 77.1 from PFF. The problem is that Alex Kappa got a 2.6 on the pass block today.
A 2.6?
I don't know if you saw it or not. He was at 0.0 at halftime, Jacob. 0.0.
That's impressive. That's like when I put in a 10-leg parlay and go 0 for 10, and I was like, I want credit because this is just as hard as hitting them all. That might be just as hard as pulling out like a 90-plus PFF grade. 0.0 at halftime? Yeah. A 2 after the game?
0.0 at halftime. Tavondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons were dominating Alex Kappa all game long. There was a there was one tweet that sent out. I saw a video of Jeffrey Simmons on the Chase Brown touchdown, I think it was, where Jeffrey Simmons basically ended up at the line of scrimmage, but he was double teamed on that play by Ted Karras and by Cordell Volson. So, Volson probably benefited from Ted Karras being there. But outside of that, it felt like every single play Joe Burrow was having to scramble away from Jeffrey Simmons, and Alex Kappa certainly was not earning his paycheck today. And we continue to say it, but I mean, the realistic fact is that Alex Kappa cannot be on this team next year, or certainly can't be your starting right guard, because he has been atrocious all year long. This isn't anything new. I mean, his best games obviously were against trash teams, but he had games against Tennessee now 2.6, Philadelphia 9.6 PFF pass grade, Pittsburgh 24.2. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Just overall not a good performance from Alex Kappa this year. And the veteran guard from Humboldt State might be nearing the end of his career.
I think you might be right. He did some good things for Cincinnati in his time here, but age seems to have finally caught up to him. The last big thing I want to touch on here before we get into the defense and then the poor tackling and kind of what solutions we can make on that side, something that I've kind of been waiting for all year finally happened as the clock was ticking down in that game. We got a public Joe Burrow blow-up at Zach Taylor, yelling at Taylor on the sideline. I'm no professional, but I did my best to try to read some lips, and it certainly seems like, F that, we suck today, that was embarrassing, were the words coming out of Joe Burrow's mouth or something along those lines. And people on Twitter seem to have the same sentiment. Could this possibly be a start of a sort of fracture between Zach Taylor and the leaders of this Bengals locker room? Because for this entirety of this season, I have said that the only thing that can get Zach Taylor out of here this season is a potential calling for it by Joe Burrow or the leaders of this football team. And this is the first kind of public blow-up. And maybe these lackluster wins, these poor performances, maybe Zach Taylor's saying we got to celebrate wins and giving out 7 game balls a week and all that stuff. Maybe that's starting to get to some of these guys that are a little bit more competitive. These games aren't pretty. And we go out afterwards, and Zach Taylor acts like we're still in the playoff hunt. I think that could still start getting to some of these guys that are really big competitors, and it's starting to eat away at them how this season's gone.
Well, we know that Joe Burrow is one of the biggest competitors
Absolutely.
in the NFL. I don't think there's any question about that. And he wants to win just as much as anybody. And I think, it's one thing to be happy with a win, but it's another thing to be happy with how you win, right? And so the question becomes, okay, well, what did Zach Taylor say as that team was coming off the field after that Chase Brown touchdown there? What was going on in that moment? The other piece of this is that Joe is as hard on himself as anybody else, right?
Yeah.
So, this game was embarrassing to him because he had 3 turnovers. So, of course, he's going to be upset with it. He's going to hold himself to the highest level of accountability, just like you want your players to. And we've been calling for Joe Burrow all season long to be a more vocal leader. I have no problem with whatever that conversation was. I agree with you that, at least from what I could tell, was some choice words that was embarrassing, stuff like that. So certainly understand how that can be frustrating if Zach Taylor's trying to be positive here in the midst of a 16-point lead, when in reality it was a terrible, terrible game. But I don't have any problem with them having that kind of discourse on the field or in the locker room or anywhere else. I have no problem with it. So, yeah.
That's what you want out of your quarterback. You want him to step up and lead, and that's what he's done over the last few days. Last few weeks is exactly what we've asked, talking about roster moves in which he wants, talking about the future of the team in the way he wants, now pushing back on his coach when things aren't going the way he wants. That's what we're asking for. We're asking for a quarterback to take control here, to take some onus in what's going on in this building, and Joe Burrow he's stepping up as leader of this team, and I think we're going to see that more and more as this offseason progresses, him really trying to take the reins of this organization and guide them in the direction that he thinks is best to get himself to the mountaintop, because the only thing I think Joe Burrow cares about is winning a Super Bowl, reaching the top of this league, and I think he's going to do everything he can, or at least push the front office to do everything he can to give himself the best chance to do that. The theme of this game, no different than the last few games. This defense still stinks. This defense still can't tackle. And the only thing that plays in my mind, and I think, just in the front of my brain, I've seen it 30,000 times since he said it. Every time Jermaine Pratt misses a tackle, all I see is the clip of him saying we don't miss tackles. It plays on the back of my eyelids on repeat all game long. It's insane, Craig. I saw at least 3 by Pratt himself today. This defense can't tackle.
Yeah, PFF only gave him 2.
Okay, my bad. Look, I rescinded it. I apologize to Jermaine. What missed tackle? What missed tackle? Because the other 2 did happen. But yeah, it's incredibly frustrating that we're week 15 and we have the same complaints after every game. I don't know what more there is to say about it. This team is incredibly fundamentally weak and mentally weak. It seems like they don't have a desire when games get a little bit of a bigger lead. The Bengals took control of this one, and it seemed like the defense relatively gave up and let the Titans drive right down the field and score, and then honestly score again at the end. Obviously, the game was out of reach there. A touchdown didn't do anything, but you'd like to have the defense show a little pride and not allow a touchdown as time expires to cut the lead to 10, cut the win to 10. They don't seem to have that. I noticed a play during the game that was the one where Tajay Spears reversed field and got the big chunk on the check down late in the game. Mike Hilton fell to a knee while being blocked, which happens, football, physical game, but we are playing a game, and Tajay Spears is in bounds. I would appreciate if you got up and tried to make a play. Mike Hilton just sat on the knee and watched Tajay run down, let the other guys take care of it. So that was basically all I needed to see for how this defense is handling this year. I think they hear the noise. I think they hear how much everyone blames them for the events of the season so far, and I think some guys are playing for contracts, like Geno Stone might be, and some guys are packing it in because it doesn't seem like this defense is giving it 100% effort. But maybe they are. I think that's something I need to start thinking about. Maybe they are giving 100% effort, and they just stink.
I don't know. I'm not going to pile on Mike Hilton on a day like today. I felt like Mike Hilton played really well.
He had a good game. That was just the one play that stuck out in my mind. I think it's a problem for a lot of the defensive guys. He had the pick and the unblocked chop down in the backfield. He had a really good game.
Yeah. Mike Hilton is one that I'm never going to accuse of not finishing plays or not playing hard. I think he's one of those guys that has time and time again shown that he's willing to play hard. I agree with you that like the tackling is an issue. PFF ultimately gives them, as of right now, at least before the initial or after the initial review, put it at 10 missed tackles for the game, 2 of which would Jermaine Pratt, like you had mentioned. I don't know. Look, I think it's probably really hard in a game like that where the momentum just never really gets going for either team to really kind of get into a groove. And I think we hear about it a lot from athletes about how they need to kind of get in a groove and get things going. And that's why, play calling matters so much.
Yeah.
And so many different things matter. And when you have 10 missed tackles, it's probably difficult, as Mike Hilton is a really good tackler, to continue to show up. And after he sees all of these other people continue to show how poorly they're going to play, it just, frustrating, I'm sure. But in a game like today where you have the 4 turnovers and, Tennessee finds a way to put up 27 points against you, like, you should be frustrated. Now, ideally, you'd see them take that out by being more aggressive and attacking more. But, I also look at play calling and, we've talked about this so many times, Jacob. I don't know how many times we have to talk about it, but third and 9 early in the game, and what is Lou dial up and all out pressure yet again, leaves everybody one-on-one for a big gain, and yet again just puts this defense in a bad position. I know that they had the success last week and had the one play that stopped Dallas on 3rd and long or 4th and long, maybe, where they went all out blitz on 4th and long. But how many times this year have we seen 3rd and long, 4th and long, and Lou dials up an all out blitz and just absolutely leaves the back end completely wide open? Because the secondary is not good enough to be left one-on-one, unfortunately. And Lou makes the decision to do it time and time again. And so as a defender, probably puts you in a tough position to continue to remain motivated when you're seeing, okay, well, I'm doing my job, but we can't get home on the rush. They brought like 7 or 8 guys on that play early on in the game, and none of them got home. the frustration is going to pile up on this team. You see it in Joe Burrow. You see it in some of the players on throughout the game. Nobody can blame them. The season didn't go the way it wanted to go, but the play calling isn't always putting them in the best position, and certainly some of their teammates are letting them down time and time again.
Absolutely. And as we continue to talk about Jermaine Pratt not being able to make plays, we know Logan Wilson's out for the year. That linebacker room's scraping the bottom of the barrel. I mean, you got Akeem Davis-Gaith out there playing more snaps than he's really ever played in his Bengals career. Mama Jong Meta's out there a lot. And that's the guy that I really want to highlight because I know this last game against the Cowboys 2 weeks ago, maybe it wasn't the prettiest. He missed the block that allowed the punt block that he inevitably recovered. So he was in the right spot at the right time to recover the ball there. And then this week, recovers the fumble that Will Levis was originally ruled down on, returns it for a touchdown, but since Will Levis was ruled down, they returned the ball to that spot. Jung Meta just finds ways to be in the mix. It seems to be a consistent theme for him. The 2 times that he's on the field, notably in his NFL career so far in the regular season, he's making turnover-worthy plays, or at least recovering the ball. And then in the preseason, we saw that he was a tackles monster. So with the struggles of Jermaine Pratt, already the loss of Logan Wilson, you're kind of chalking that position up to a loss anyway on a weekly basis. I would like to see a lot more of Jong Meta because of what he's been able to do in those, opportune situations, seemingly making plays. And that's what I'm looking for on defense. I don't care if the guy runs a little bit slower than average 40. I don't care if he's a little shorter and a couple pounds lighter than you'd want your average linebacker to be. But he seems to make plays, and that's what he did at Wisconsin. And hopefully that's what he can do more of in Cincinnati. I think he's a guy that we should be seeing more of on defense. And we've seen it already with a lot of the other positions, whether it's injuries that forced them to or benchings for the older guys. We've seen an infusion of youth a little bit on defense, and it hasn't helped a ton, but at least we're starting to learn a little bit about what we have in those guys. I think we got to go a little bit further down the line and keep getting some of those further down the bench guys more and more reps.
I mean, if Jermaine Pratt's going to continue to put up a 26.9 PFF grade, I mean, what good is it?
Yeah.
Jong Meta played 5 snaps today, Jacob.
Right.
5. Shaka Hayward was in there for 4 snaps. I don't get it. I don't know. I don't necessarily understand the rotation still. I'm still trying to figure that piece out for sure. But what I do know is that Jermaine Pratt being on the field for every single offensive play of the Tennessee Titans today, all 70 of them, and racking up PFF grades of 36.1 against the run, 41.3 tackle, 49.9 on the pass rush, coverage grade of 28.7. Like he hasn't been good in just about any facet of the game this year.
No, not at all.
And it's not like he's, outside of maybe the Kansas City game where he showed a little bit of flash. I think he graded last week pretty well against Dallas, but he's been average at best most weeks. And for a team who has a ton of holes, you have to figure out at some point what you have. Yeah. And right now, the biggest frustration that I have with Zach Taylor and this coaching staff is that they're not really taking the time to figure out what they have on this team and what really is a need and what maybe they can go into 2025 with some of their young talent in, right? We know that positions like safety are going to be a need at some level, but can Jordan Battle be an answer at any level in that backfield versus a guy like Von Bell who signed a 1-year contract and we know isn't going to be around next year, right? So I'll say this. I mean, Von Bell only played 14 snaps today, so maybe they're moving more in that direction with Jordan Battle, who played 63 of them. Geno Stone played 60 snaps at free safety, kind of joked about him kind of making a comeback now that the season's over. But DJ Ivey only got in there for 5 snaps today.
And a
PI. So, yeah, I don't know.
Colin Will makes a great point in the chat. Why would the coaches look to play young talent right now? They're not incentivized to do so because they're coaching for their jobs. I think if this defensive staff is thinking, hey, I'm fired out of here if this defense doesn't look better in the next 3 weeks, maybe you aren't incentivized to throw those young guys in there with a little bit more volatility. But the stars aren't working. So if they are coaching, or not stars, but the older guys aren't working. So if they are coaching for their jobs, wouldn't they roll the dice as much as possible in these last few weeks to say, oh, I have this piece, and this piece that I can build on. Don't fire me. At least that's where my mentality goes. I think if you're coaching,
those vets are why you're getting fired.
Exactly. Right. So I don't think that necessarily plays for this situation. I think if they're worried about their job, they try to find as many quote unquote bright spots as you possibly can on the roster right now.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately the right answer. And I respect Colin for the question, but I think if we're being honest, if you continue to roll out the veterans who have continued to show you that they aren't good enough to run this defense, all you're doing is solidifying your job being on the line. And like Jacob is saying, maybe Jung Meta comes out and shows that he has a little bit of spark and gives this defense something. Maybe Cedric Johnson can get a little bit more of pressure on the quarterback that we weren't getting for most of the game. Maybe obviously we talked about guys like Jordan Battle who comes up with the turnover today. So look, I think Lou Anarumo should be looking at it and saying, oh shoot, my job's on the line. I've had all of these same guys in the lineup all year long. Yeah. Maybe I need to be trying to do something different to try and save my job and show that spark and say, hey, this wasn't a scheme issue. This was a personnel issue. And now we've identified it and we're moving on. But the issue is what took them so long to do it, not the question of should they do it at all. And, Colin's response is that they clearly don't think the young guys are better. Which is an issue with the coaching, and that may or may not be true. I mean, we came out of spring camp or out of camp wondering why Jordan Battle wasn't getting more shot on this team. So right from the get-go, when Jordan Battle showed you so much last year, you're now asking him to come in, and this is what we talked about earlier in the year too, is that Jordan Battle could have potentially carried over momentum into next year. But instead, this year he comes in and he sits on the bench and he's not able to kind of carry any of the momentum in. So, look, I at the end of the day, and I don't know this answer for sure, but it sure feels like Lou and Frank Pollock are going to be the martyrs on this team. They're going to most likely not be back in 2025, and whether or not that's the right answer, who knows? But the truth of the matter is that somebody has to be held accountable on this staff. And it's most likely going to be these two, and then probably more on the defensive side of the ball, if we're being honest. But it for sure is leaning that way. And if Lou wants any shot at keeping his job, he's got to make drastic changes, and he's got to get a spark going over these last 3 weeks.
It's been a pretty somber show so far for a win, so we'll move into win's a win, because ultimately that's what it is. Once you get a win, it is a win. And when you're playing the football we're playing right now, you need them to stay alive. And the Bengals pick up the win in Nashville, and they are still alive. There's a lot of games going on the rest of the day that have a lot of implications on percentages and playoff machine and all that stuff, but to win a game where you certainly don't play your best, the offense plays far from perfect, turning the ball over. Defense even turns the ball over once themselves. Usually the Bengals can't overcome giving the other team that many second chances, but today they were able to, and that's a little bit refreshing to see these last 2 weeks. The Bengals win games that they usually don't win, at least the type of game that the 2024 Bengals don't win. Joe Burrow throwing 2 picks, that's a recipe for a certain loss for this team at any point this season. But today, able to overcome it. I know the Titans are terrible, one of the worst teams in the entire league, but I think we have to reset a little bit what we expect us to be. I mean, this defense is horrendous. It's one of the worst, maybe, of all time. 27 points to the Titans, and you win the game by 10. I guess I'll take it. 10-point win. It's hard to be upset about that in the NFL. You cover the spread. You cover the moved spread up to 6 earlier today. So across the board, really, ultimately, you have to be a little bit happy about a win, even though it was about as ugly as it can come.
Yeah, I mean, a win's a win, but certainly ugly. And the most important piece of this is that you remain somewhat in the playoff picture. And you mentioned there's more games going on right now that impact that, and I think it's probably worth us ending the show on that conversation, so I won't go into it right now. But when you've got I think the frustrating part for me and why I'm down on it is that not only was it an ugly win from start to finish, but like even at the end there, and this is the like thing that got me most frustrated, I think, is you're down on like the 1 yard line and you're still getting delay of games late in the game.
Yeah.
In what should be a very clear run the ball, score the touchdown, get the game over with situation. And Zach Taylor has had this issue all year long with getting the plays in. And Joe Burrow has shown frustration previously with the amount of time that it's taken Zach to make play calls. And it came up yet again. And it just, one of these times that is going to burn this team.
Yeah.
And, I think, yes, a win is a win, but a 10-point win against the Tennessee Titans in a game where you force 6 interceptions or 6 turnovers is pretty embarrassing. That's a team. That's a game that I feel like most good teams win by 30.
Absolutely.
And the Bengals found a way to win by 10.
They really had every opportunity to win this one by 30 too. I mean, they had every chance to have this game. I mean, a defensive touchdown, you drop the ball at the 1, there's boom, already 44-27. You don't throw one of those interceptions and you score, and there's your blowout that a good team beats this team by. So that goes back to the conversation about just like how far is this Bengals team, and that's why it's kind of frustrating when you play these bad teams, because I talked about it throughout the week. I talked about how you start to buy back in a little bit. Maybe this team isn't part of this bad group, but we got a super chat during the show. Sorry, I forget who it was, or I'd give you credit for it, but they said this team's just the best bad team, and I think that's pretty true. There's a pretty big gap between the Bengals and then the worst teams in the NFL, I think. We've seen that as they've beaten the Giants and the Browns and now the Titans and the Raiders already this year, but there's also a pretty big gap between the Bengals and the playoff teams, as all of their losses have come to the playoff teams, and except for the Patriots at the beginning of the year. And that's what this team is. They're a middle-of-the-pack team who's a lot better than the teams that are terrible and just not good enough to beat any contender. And that's a real shame based off what we've seen the last 3 years. Obviously, last year going over 500 with Jake Browning, you think you shove Joe Burrow in there and it all changes and you're good to go. Playoffs, at least, we're going to be fine. And then obviously not the case there, as this season we're fighting an uphill fight. But as we move on, the biggest game this weekend for the Bengals, obviously getting a win's the most important, but we know we got to do that, so we look around that. The biggest game for the Bengals this weekend, Colts and Broncos. And the real shame is that you can't have them both lose, because that's what would help the Bengals the most. And sure, I'm sure some people in the chat are saying, oh, just tie. Well, that would actually be the worst outcome for the Bengals, because then neither team picks up a loss. So a tie is certainly not an option. We need one team to lose. Craig, I put it in the chat what I want, and I think you agree with me. Maybe we can explain it to the people, because there seems to be some confusion. I think it helps the Bengals a lot more if the Broncos win this football game than the Colts.
Well, what you have to do is you have to look at the playoff scenarios, right? And you have to understand what it's going to take for the Bengals to get into the playoffs. And what that comes down to is you need 3 things. The most clear route, I should say, to the Bengals making the playoffs is there are 3 things that need to happen. You need to have the Miami Dolphins lose 2 of their last 4. They lost today to Tennessee. Yep. So you just lost 1 there. You need, number 2, you need the Colts to lose 2 of their last 4 games. And then you need the Broncos to lose at least 3. So you got Miami losing 1 today already.
Right.
If we look at their remaining schedule, we need Miami to lose 1 more game, and they have games coming up against the 49ers, the Browns, and the Jets. None of those are really like locked in stone losses, but losing a kind of coin flip game to the Texans is a good start. You now have a coin flip game against the 49ers. The Browns game, you'd think they'd probably win, but then you have a coin flip potentially against the Jets in cold weather in January in Meadowlands. Then you turn and you look at the Colts, and you need them to lose 2 of their last 4 games. The problem is that today is the only game on the calendar that, if you look at it, should really be marked down as a loss.
Yeah.
They play the Broncos today, and then they get Tennessee at home next week. Then they go to the New York Giants, and then they get home against the Jacksonville Jaguars to end the season. So your best bet in that is for the Broncos. Well, let's finish it up with the Broncos. The Broncos need to lose 3 of their last 4.
Right.
They get the Colts today at home, but then they go to the Chargers, to the Bengals, and then end with the Kansas City Chiefs.
All 3 losable
And so
games.
if you're looking for the Broncos to lose 3, the Colts to lose 2, and Miami to lose 2, your most likely scenario, at least as we look at it, is for the Broncos to win today against the Colts, handing the Colts one of their 2 losses, but then the Broncos to lose out against the Chargers, the Bengals, and the Chiefs, which, like you said, seems likely. The question becomes whether or not the Chiefs play their starters in week 18, but that's outside of your control. At this point, the way the Chiefs have looked, with the way Patty Mahomes looked today and the way that he left this game, brings a lot of questions into that, but I'm still going to go with the Broncos winning today, because if you give the Colts the loss, you have to hope that the Colts can stumble against the Titans, Giants, or Jaguars to end the season. 3 teams that, quite frankly, are tanking for the number 1 pick or trying to get as best pick as possible. The Colts are going to have to try to lose one of those games, and we certainly know that's not going to happen. And so I don't know. There's obviously other, I think they mentioned it on the broadcast today, there are other ways where this could theoretically go the Bengals' way without those 3 scenarios, but those are the 3 very clear scenarios. The Bengals win out, the Dolphins lose twice, the Colts lose twice, and the Broncos lose 3 times. So for those people who are watching the Broncos and Colts today and wondering who you should be rooting for, I know it's really difficult, and I think there's probably couple different ways you can look at it. But as I look at it today, the easiest way for the Colts to get 2 losses is for them to lose one of them today, because I don't see them losing 2 of 3 to the Titans, Giants, and Jaguars.
I absolutely agree. I'm on the exact same page as you. And Sean Connor says in the chat, you're assuming wins and losses. Just cut the games up this week and get closer to the wild card. And I agree with him, because we've already seen a lot of upsets this year. Unless you have a 5% chance to make the playoffs. If your chance is this low, you got to look ahead. You got to see what else you need. We need so many things to happen for the Bengals to sneak in. You got to start looking a little bit bigger picture than just what helps us at the end of the day today. Because obviously if the Broncos win, the Bengals would fall further away from the playoffs today. But in the big picture, I think it gives them an overall better chance. And when you look at the future schedules, it's going to be a struggle for the Colts to lose 2 games, even if they do lose today. So I think you're fighting a real uphill fight if the Broncos can't get business done today. Obviously, there are other paths, but it certainly gets a little bit sticky as you move forward. But Bengals have to just keep taking care of business so we can keep having these conversations. It's a lot of fun to try to find a path, and hopefully we're doing that for a few more weeks. Next week, the Bengals are back on the road. Or headed home. Bengals are headed home to play the Browns. Originally, the Thursday Night Football game, that's right. It was originally Stripe the Jungle. That's why I was forgetting. And now we're striping the jungle at 1 p.m. on a Sunday. Woohoo! That's going to look great. But look, we deserve it. And if Bengals fans think that this season's just a big old prank on them, you're right. Because if you're watching us, we really appreciate it, but that means you're missing the Cardinals game. And Jonah Williams scored a touchdown. So the overall prank on Cincinnati Bengals fans keeps going this year as Jonah Williams scores a touchdown for the Arizona Cardinals. Bengals did get a win today, so we get the final laugh, 37-27, Bengals over the Titans in Nashville. A really sloppy win, but when you only have 5 of them, it's hard not to celebrate. And the Bengals pick it up an inch closer to maybe the playoff picture. That's going to do it for today's post-game show. Craig?
Real quick, Jacob. Yeah. I think we skipped over the most important piece of the Bengals playoff picture, and that's them winning out.
Oh, right.
And
I've moved that to the side because we know that has to happen.
Which we know has to happen, but let's not forget about the fact that they're playing the Browns, who always play them difficult. Then they get the Broncos, who we just talked about need to lose their last 3 games or 3 of their last 4. And then you get the Steelers, who already beat the Bengals once.
Yeah.
Like, I know we're spending a lot of time focusing on other teams and talking about scenarios that have to happen on other teams, but we just as hard need to root for the Bengals to win out, because Absolutely. I think their path to winning out is actually more difficult than any of the other 3 scenarios happening that have to happen. If you were to tell me that the Broncos had to lose 3, the Colts had to lose 2, the Dolphins had to lose 2 and the Bengals had to win 4. The least likely of that scenario is the Bengals winning 4.
You're right.
Now they get the win today, but realistically, we still have 3 more weeks of wins that the Bengals have to pick up. But it can be done.
And
the
the
Steelers
best part about the
theoretically
Bengals winning 4 in a row is it would actually be 5 in a row. Yeah, no, having the Steelers lock up the division and rest starters is definitely the Bengals' best chance in Week 18. But I keep hearing people say that, oh, we beat the Titans, we just got to rip off 4 in a row, we're in the playoffs. This is a 6-8 team. We're asking them to win 5 games in a row. I mean, that's something. But if anyone's going to believe, you guys know I'm going to believe. And I'm inching. Oh, man, I'm inching back in there. I
was literally ask you at the beginning of this game if you were going to allow this 6 turnover performance from this defense to make you believe that we're a good defense again, like you did after the Giants game.
I don't know. If you're not a good defense, but you get 6 turnovers a game, maybe you'll outscore a lot of teams. Maybe that's the recipe for success.
It would be really hard to lose a game with 6 turnovers. I'll give you that.
That's right. This Bengals team would be playoff bound if we played Will Levis every week, but alas, we do not. Next week, we play a guy who's probably going to be in the Christmas spirit as well, handing out some presents to the defense. At least he normally does. Jameis Winston and the Browns come to town, so maybe the defense can keep the hot hand rolling. You did say that this 3-game stretch was going to be the point where they got me to buy back in and then rip my heart out against Bo Nix. So it's setting up pretty well for you with a big turnover game today. We'll be, I don't want to say less pessimistic on Tuesday because we'll have the film and I imagine that would get worse. But
you know me and my film.
Yeah, we'll be clear minds and more succinct talking points for sure. That's how that always works. So for today's post-game show, that's going to do it for Craig and I. Thank you to everyone who spent your Sunday with us. We really appreciate it. We'll see you guys Tuesday. Long break this week. 48 hours between shows. Wow. I'm not used to that. The quick turnaround last week, Monday, Tuesday, was something else. But we'll see you guys on Tuesday night. Hoo day, everybody.